Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this morning on strategic blogging. Just going to give it a few minutes for people to join us and log in, but I just want to make sure that for those that are on right now, can you see my screen and can you hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up in the chat or even just a quick mention on the mic there, just to make sure the technical side is taken care of. Perfect.
Yes, sounds good.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned, just going to wait a few moments here for people to log on, get settled. If you haven't had the opportunity to be a part of our webinars in the past, I'll just give you kind of a brief sort of rundown of how they work. So we run through basically some slides and topics. Today we're going to be talking about blogging, of course, and then there's going to be an opportunity for questions, and then just one thing that we really like to do is have you guys share ideas and thoughts too, just from my own experience. So there'll be opportunities to do that as well. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to get started here. So as I mentioned, the topic today is strategic blogging for success, rocking your online presence. So we're going to get right into it. But first, we're going to just do a quick land acknowledgement. So in the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, Alchemy Communications, as an inhabitant of Calgary, Alberta, honors and acknowledges Mohkinstsis and the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, as well as the Stoney, Nakota, and Tsuut'ina nations. We also acknowledge that the territory we work and live upon is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. And a little bit about who we are. So my name is Drew Sherbin, obviously, and I'm with Alchemy Communications. We are a full service agency that offers marketing, PR, crisis communication support. And we work with companies from all different areas. Some of them just mentioned here, municipalities, nonprofits, and small to mid-sized businesses. I do recognize a few names on the attendance list, so thank you. And there's some that I don't, so welcome if this is your first time. And we're going to get right into it. Okay, so welcome to the Strategic Blogging Workshop. Obviously, for you to join this, you have some ideas or just experience with blogging, or just even want to get maybe questions answered or thoughts. You might not even have blogged a day in your life and you've always heard about it and maybe want to implement that into your communication strategies. We're here to kind of help you through that and answer some questions going right from the beginning of why blogs, and then kind of what does that mean to create a successful blog? So I think sometimes the misconception is that you can have this great piece of writing and it's just going to go like wildfire on the internet, right? And blow up and be that's going to be the way you get customers or your message across. But there's things behind the scenes that you can really do to tweak that and ensure that while the copy is great, you really want to be keying in on if you're reaching your audience, little tips around SEO, things like that. So we're going to cover all those bases today. Okay. So right off the bat, why blogs? Well, there's a few bullet points here, and I'll just run through them quickly. They maximize your online presence, they boost brand awareness, they establish thought leaderships, and they drive conversions. So whether your conversions are sales, memberships, just people following you on social media channels, whether it's signing up to be a member for your website, whatever it is, that blogs go a long way in helping get those audience members to you directly. So they've really become an essential tool in the digital landscape today, and they can be used anywhere from individuals to businesses. And what we're really going to do is look at why these are crucial for maximizing the first bullet point, maximizing your online presence, and what they do to enhance that. So blogs play a significant role in doing just that, enhancing the online presence they do a few things. They increase your website's visibility, and they also impact the search engine ranking. So when you're on Google, other search engines, if you have your SEO is up to date and there's good, metrics around that, it'll help people find you. So if you have blog topics that have your keywords and people are searching those, that blog may come up and it will enhance your search rankings when people are looking for you as well. So when you're regularly updating, as I mentioned, that the blogging or your blogging strategy with the high quality content, it improves your website's SEO, as I mentioned, making it more likely to appear in those search results. We'll get into a little bit about what that looks like further into the presentation, but the higher visibility leads to increased organic traffic. So it really what it does is allows you to reach a wider audience and expands your online reach. So the second bullet point here around boosting brand awareness, what blogs really do is they serve as a tool for building and strengthening just that, your brand awareness. So when you're consistently publishing informative and engaging content related to whatever your industry is or your niche or your topic, you can really position yourself as an expert in the field. So whether the individual is an expert or whether your company is that leading voice in that field, when you're sharing those insights, the knowledge, the industry trends, tips, whatever it is that your blog may incorporate, it helps to build that trust and credibility with your target audience. And we'll get into identifying audiences as we go. But what it does is, I'm big on that. If you've seen some of my other presentations, that whole idea of trust is huge. So if you can create that trust with your consumer, your customer, if you're part of a municipality, your residents, it really helps in boosting that awareness of your brand, whether that's a personal brand, your company brand, your municipal brand. It helps to that recognition, that recall. So when we're talking about blogs, if you sort of get in that regular schedule of posting and people know when a blog is coming out, that recall really starts to improve and it helps with brand awareness as well. So establishing thought leadership. So I briefly touched upon that when we're talking about brand awareness, but if you can provide that opportunity to showcase your expertise and establish not only yourself as that thought leader, but if your company in that industry, what it does is it helps to differentiate your brand from competitors. Now, everyone is sort of trying to get this piece of the pie, right? Everyone is saying they're an expert or trust us, we're your trusted source. But there's other ways to do that without just saying that. So it's really about the topics you're choosing, the things that you're kind of willing to take on. Sometimes there's strategies around, tackling tough subjects. What that does is it shows that you're that thought leader who isn't afraid to talk about the difficult things, right? So what it does is it again, back to that word trust, it gains trust from current customers, potential customers, clients, members, whoever your audience is. And I just see a question here coming in. So what exactly is thought leadership? Great question. So basically what that means is it's around, so you take, if it's an individual, they could be talking about sort of their thoughts or their opinions on a certain topic or thing in their industry. So for example, let's just use alchemy and myself, for example, I could pen a blog on basically the importance of blogging. And then within that, you kind of establish your credibility around why people in your audience should trust you as a thought leader in that topic. So maybe you could say whatever it is that you've written, or I've written numerous amounts of blogs, or I've done research in this area. You set the table of why people should trust you and listen to you as that thought leader, right? So hopefully that answer your question. We can get into it a little bit more as we go along as well. Okay, here. So yeah, I'm just trying to get back onto my notes here, but when we're talking about that thought leadership, it's also about kind of offering those unique perspectives and that thought-provoking content. So when I mentioned maybe your niche is you're not one to kind of stray away from those areas, right? You position yourself as the authority in that field, and you're really attracting and you're creating a dedicated following amongst your audience as well. And the last point here on this slide is around driving conversion. So as I mentioned, whatever that thing you're looking at converting to, whether it's a customer, a new member signing up, a client, whatever it is, blogs have a huge impact on driving those conversions and generating leads. So the way that they do that is that basically, hold on here 1 second, I got a little pop-up that covered my notes, but that's okay. So what it does is it really guides the readers towards taking those desired actions. So such as, signing up for a newsletter, downloading an ebook, making a purchase, contacting you for more information, things like that. What it does is it builds that trust. It shows that there's a two-way street. Like you're basically saying, contact me for more, or if you want to learn more, this is how you do it. So it helps. Not only it's continuing that conversation that you've established within that blog, and what it does with the reader is it increases the likelihood of them, whatever it is, converting into that clicking that button, signing up for that newsletter, contacting you for more information, joining you at your next, municipal event, whatever it is. It's about converting that person and having them follow you more, maybe reading another blog, becoming a member, whatever it is. So it's always important to sort of have those calls to action, and we'll talk about that as we go along. But it's good to sort of leave that reader with something. Okay, the next step, what do you want to do to find out more information? So, okay. Okay, so we talked about the reason for blogs, but why do they matter? What's the point, right? So I mentioned kind of I've kind of talked about all these points, but I'm going to dive a little deeper into them. So around the higher SEO rankings, enhancing brand trust, educating customers, building that online identity, and creating those connections. So when we're talking about the SEO and higher SEO rankings, blogs really play a huge part, and they're instrumental in really improving your website's search engine optimization, for those who aren't familiar with the acronym SEO. So when you're regularly publishing that content, that relevant, valuable content on your blogs, you increase the chances, as I mentioned before, of ranking higher in search engines. So the way SEO works, if you're coming up with phrases that are likely to be searched or terms that people are searching, what it does is the search engines prioritize the websites that consistently produce those messages or that fresh content, and it leads to that organic traffic and improved visibility. So that's really one thing that when we talk about blogs, it's always looking at, what are the phrases that people are searching? What are the terms that people are searching for? The second point here around that brand trust again is blogs, they really enhance, as I mentioned before, that trust amongst your audience, not only just your audience, but also trust internally as well. They offer that insight and educational content through the blog, and it establishes you basically as that reliable source of information. So whatever industry you're in, whatever, information you're trying to get out there, if you're providing it in a sort of that blog format, that's more than just, a page on the website, or for more information, click here. What it does is it allows people to not only get that valuable information, but you may be answering common questions, addressing if there's pain points or things that, people are interested. You're addressing them in that form of the blog. So what that does, when you couple it with that call to action or to learn more, you're answering that question, but you're also planting the seed that if people want to learn more about it, they can contact you. And you've already started building that trust, so they feel that comfortability in reaching out to you after, reading a blog or a series of blogs. They become sort of they'll be, in some cases, you'll see people that are reaching out, and they're kind of like the usual suspects, right? They have questions, or they're part of your kind of group that are sharing your your blogs on social, they're kind of with you as you go through this blogging journey as well. And that's a good sort of segue into that next point about educating customers or whoever it is, audience, right? So what blogs really do is they serve as a platform for educating customers. And we're not talking about education in the terms of, providing education or information, but you're teaching them about your services, your products, the industry that you're related to, right? You're almost creating these audience or these champions that will help you enhance your services, whatever that may be. So when we're talking about blogging, when you're creating that informative and helpful content, as I mentioned before, you address those concerns that people may have. And you can find that if people are emailing concerns or questions, that could become a blog topic, right? So if you're noticing that, there's a huge, you notice you got a lot of questions or queries to the website about this, then that might become the next month's or week's blog topic, right? So when you're providing solutions, you're listening, you're offering those valuable insights, the customers feel like they're with you along that experience and that journey, and they're becoming knowledgeable as well. So it's sort of teaching about the process or the program or whatever it is your kind of industry niche is. You're building that community as you go along. So it's just not about putting your own thoughts, it's kind of contributing and building that online identity as well. So as I mentioned with that, what it does is it gives that online identity for the brand, but what it really says to people is there's consistency. So when we're talking about blogs, it's always important when we'll get into this and kind of what makes a successful blog and what you need to do when you're looking at it, is that you should always be relating back. And this is kind of just a best practices for communications in general, is just consistent branding elements such as tone of voice, a visual identity, consistent content and themes. If you're all over the place in terms of when you're publishing a blog or putting it out there, you're not going to get that. People they won't think it's you, right? They'll see, oh, okay, it looks different than the last one, or the colors are different. I don't know. And then subconsciously they could be thinking, okay, this isn't the same. But if it's all recognizable and you have, recognizable visually, themes as well, it'll help you stand out from the competition. And it really helps to, again, build that trust with your readership as well. And it just makes it easier for them to connect and engage. If you are promoting your blog on social and you're consistent, and if you have a certain color scheme or logo for that blog, there's that instant recognition around that, right? Which kind of leads well into the final point about those brand connections. So blogs, yes, they're good pieces in terms of the written content, but what they do is they really create that meaningful connection between you, your brand, and your target audience. So when you're sharing the stories, when you're sharing, your personal experiences around, if that's what your blog is sort of based on, you're sharing that relatable content, you really foster, as I mentioned before, that sense of community and loyalty among your readership. There's a reason why people follow, like, especially on social media or, bloggers, you hear the term bloggers, they're connecting, they're reaching their audiences. The audience is saying that person who writes that blog is just like me. I lived through that. And we're kind of talking about, those personal individual bloggers, but it can be the same for organizations as well. If you're consistently relating to that end user or that reader, there's a reason they're coming back. They're relating to you, right? So you're creating that relationship, you're building those communication channels, you're strengthening the relationships, and you're becoming a better, I wouldn't say better brand, but you're bridging the gap between the customer and the audience and your brand. So it's just you're not just seen as like a logo or a name. There's a connection with that. And blogging is a huge way to help you stand out from the crowd. Okay, so we're going to kind of get into it here. When we're looking at blogging and you've kind of decided, okay, I want to start a blog. What do I do? How do I kind of navigate this? The first thing that you really want to look at is choosing the topic or the themes when you're getting into that. So whether you're an organization or an individual, they should always kind of center around the alignment of your goals, right? So blogs can be tailored to align with specific organizational goals and objectives, personal objectives and goals, or opinions and thoughts. But whatever it is, whether objective is to, if you're a sales driven, if it's to increase sales, promote maybe a product, drive website traffic, blog content can really be used strategically to support those goals. If your goal is, just to inform the community and kind of get your thoughts out there, that's still a goal, right? So you still need to kind of, going back to around communication strategies and planning and goals and objectives, it's no different with blogs. You should always kind of be relating it back to, okay, what's the purpose of this? What are our goals around this? What do they fit the organizational or personal goals? Or are we creating a whole brand new set of goals with these blogs? What's the point, right? So when you align these topics to those organizational goals and all those little things that go into that, so the tone, messaging, organization / personal objectives, the blogs become just another powerful tool for driving those outcomes. So it's always good to look back and think, okay, why do we need a blog? Because someone might come to you, and I've seen this sometimes. It's usually from, a person higher up, and they or even on the same level, and they say, hey, you know what, let's blog. And you're sort of thinking, okay, well, why? What do we need to say? Do you want me to just write something? What's the point? So it's really good about kind of aligning and thinking about what's the point of these? Do they align with the goals, as I mentioned, or are we creating, new goals around these blogs? So the second point here is, when you're looking at that topic, is how is it going to resonate with your audience? So what do you want your audience to feel, think when they see this? So when you create the content that resonates with your target audience, when you're understanding their needs, their preferences, and the pain points, you can really develop those topics based on sort of the thoughts and feelings of what your audience is telling you what they want, or the more information of what they need, right? So it's just, when you're in the kind of the mindset of, okay, let's think about what topics we're going to be looking at for our blogs, really look at your audience, look at what people are saying on social, look at maybe what people are saying in your industry. It doesn't even have to be your audience. You can just look at competitors, look at just the general world around us, right? There's always opportunities to find positive and insightful blog topics to kind of mold and create to fit your target market or your target demographic. So a big one when we're looking at those topics, and even just, okay, what are we going to blog about, or what's my blog going to be? You can really find a lot of positive and insight into kind of what to do when you're looking at those trending topics or keywords, as I mentioned. So even if you have an idea, throw it in Google and see what pops up, right? Like, you can research that way and see if you think that people might be talking about this. You can it's always good to do a little background research on your own to see, are people even talking about this? What's popping up when I search this? So when you're searching those keywords, those trending topics, and when you find that and you're kind of piggybacking on that, it kind of goes back to that SEO and that website ranking. So that's all about that, maximizing the visibility, the relevance. So when you're identifying those trends, when you're conducting the keyword research, you optimize your blog for those search engines, right? So if you find one, you type it in, it's just Google explodes and it's all this stuff, and you're like, yeah, okay, bang, we're gonna leverage these keywords as well. You're just kind of inserting yourself into that conversation as well through blogging. So when you incorporate those, the chances of rankings increasing goes up. You're reaching, a different, the likelihood of reaching your audience increases. So it's one thing to have a great idea, but research is just as equally important, right? Because you might think that everyone is talking about it, but if you research and you're like, okay, it's not really what the data is telling me, it might save you a lot of of work, even before you start, right? So, and the final bullet point here is addressing those customer interests and pain points, as I mentioned. So they really offer that opportunity to, you're answering that question directly, right? So if your blog's around 10, for example, could be like 10 things you need to know around tax season, or challenge with doing your taxes, whatever. You're addressing those questions that people are already having. So when you've obviously you went back, you researched, you felt, yep, these are the ones that are people are needing answers to, you build it out that way. So what that does is it addresses the customer interests and pain points, but it positions you, back to that thought leadership, as that trusted source of helping people, or whatever it is. If you're in a position of, giving those tips, if it's just providing insights, you're building that trust with your audience. So the next sort of slide, and I just want to kind of wrap up this purposeful topic. So okay, so we've sat down, we've figured out our topics, our keywords. This is what we want to do. The next step, and the next thing that you should really be looking at is, okay, the frequency. How long or how often are we going to be posting these blogs? What's the posting schedule? What's the strategy around promoting these? How are we engaging these audiences? That is equally as important as the content, because you need to basically, and I'll get right to the slide, is that consistency is huge. So this first bullet point around consistency versus quality, they're both very crucial when we're talking about blogging. So the quality is sort of that next, or that previous slide about either research and, we have this great blog, it's well thought out. But consistency is equally as important, because if you're not regularly publishing, or you're not regularly sort of keeping up with these schedules and maintaining that predictable schedule, you're really going to lose that audience. And the whole goal of this is keeping your audience engaged. So if you post one blog, and then wait 4 months, and then post another, and then maybe post one the next week, and then if your scheduling is all kind of wonky and off, it really impacts that engagement of the audience. So when you're looking at sort of deciding when to post, and there's no right or wrong way, it's just you come up with what is the consistency and what's the cadence that works for you. So are we posting, do we have enough content, or do we have enough resources to do a monthly blog, a weekly blog, whatever that is, whatever you decide upon, just make sure that there's a consistency around that. So with that being said, when you look at the consistency, you also have to incorporate that quality around it. So you don't want to have it flipped where it's like, oh man, we have to publish a blog every week. Let's just get it out there. And the quality starts to kind of wane, or it's like there's no real story in the blog, and it's just a blog to get out the blog. Don't let it get to that point. There's still, if you find that that's happening, you might have to revisit your posting cadence and your schedule. So maybe it's, okay, we're ambitious, we wanted one every week. Maybe we move it to bi-weekly or monthly, right? So it's just about finding that connection, what is right for your audience. So lack of a better term, it's about finding that balance between the consistency and the quality, because once you do, when you find that, again, you're going to be into that kind of that realm of building the trust. You're keeping people coming back. You're maintaining that schedule. There's a reputation that's starting to build around your content. So that's just as important as the content itself, is that consistency versus quality. So as I mentioned before, there's tons of different, you can do a weekly blog, monthly blog, you have, a blog every quarter, whatever it is, but there's reasons and there's benefits for whatever schedule you decide to do. So different posting schedules offer different benefits depending on what your audience and what your content strategy dictates. So posting daily or multiple times a week can help drive that consistent traffic. But if it's sort of slipping in that, if we're looking at the consistency versus quality, if it starts to slip there, you might often be doing yourself a disservice if you're just, again, getting a blog to get it up because that's our schedule, you might be losing readership as well. So if you're into that, in that sort of your schedule, what you've identified is you're catering to that highly engaged audience who want that frequency. And if it's working, it's great. But if we look at that and you've kind of identified, okay, well, maybe our audience is more around that weekly or bi-weekly. It allows you for more thoroughly researched content, or providing more of that higher quality to readers. So if you sort of decided, okay, we want something out every day, then people are there's an expectation that it's quick, it's this, that. But if you're sort of in that weekly mode or bi-weekly where it's, okay, these are well thought out, they're well researched, you're connecting with your audience, whatever it may be. So however you thought, or whatever the research you did ahead of time, it's all about connecting with your audience's preferences. And when you're looking at that, it should really align, as I mentioned, what do they want? And also a huge one that people are going to probably say is resources. If you just don't have the time to do it daily, then why set that precedent, right? So just be mindful of what works for your organization as well. And then when you're looking at sort of that cadence, that schedule, what we want to do, it's crucial, 100%. You should be doing this right off the bat, is look at that content planning and what that looks like for a successful blogging strategy. So that kind of goes back to the previous slide about those topics. But when you plan your blog content in advance, when you're looking sort of that months ahead, you're ensuring that you're sort of ahead of the game, right? You're ensuring that there's a consistent flow of topics. The last thing you want to get to is you look at your calendar and you're like, oh my God, I have to do a blog. We got to get a blog up, but I don't know anything. I don't know what to write about or what the topic is. So that's going to happen. Life is life. But if you can avoid those last minute stressors, it really helps when you're talking about building that audience around your blog. So planning is huge. So you've often heard sometimes even in social media or other avenues and even newsletters, you're creating that editorial calendar. Blogging is no different. So you can also have an editorial calendar for your blog. So you map out your blog topics, you sort of identify your key dates. If there's anything that kind of links with other strategies within your organization, maybe a blog would be warranted in that case or situation. So maybe there's a new product launch. Well, let's have a blog to go along with everything else that we're doing. Key dates, we all know when the holiday season is. So how can we leverage that? Depending on your industry, if summer is a huge one, summer is a huge time for you, then let's strategically plan around what topics we want to get out to our audience, right? So a well-planned strategy around that, it goes all the way back to what I was saying before. It helps maintain that consistency, and it ensures you that your topics are kind of not only on point with what you're discussing, but there's a diverse range of topics. It allows for that efficient content creation and distribution. So finally here, engaging your audience is vital for building that following. As I mentioned before, it might sound like a broken record, but it's huge. So the more you can engage and be kind of that pulse in what your audience is saying, it helps to go a long way when you're deciding that schedule, when you're building out your strategies around this, because as I mentioned before, you can glean and gain a lot of insight into what topics your audience wants. So if you encourage, interaction through comments, or, encourage people to share on social, encourage people to continue the discussion, you're engaging, but you're also creating that content for the next round, right? So you're valuing your readers' input, you're kind of taking them along with the journey of your blogging strategy here, and you're engaging them. So one thing that I've seen other kind of clients or even organizations and even blogs that I read on my own is that they come up with creative ways to engage audience. So it's just not about saying, share this blog if you found it interesting. They create quizzes, surveys, contests, anything that can really engage that audience to encourage that participation. So when we're talking about audience, when we're ending, the last bullet point is the segue into the next slide, and that's by design. It's about, okay, who is the audience? What are we trying to reach? And audiences can change. As I mentioned before, it's always good to go back to look at your overall goals and objectives and those audiences that you've identified. But when you go through your research and your planning and your sort of blog strategy, if you identify that there's a segment or an area that we haven't connected with, they can become part of your audience. So how do we reach them? What is that audience that we want to connect with? So when we look at amplifying that content, it kind of goes back to those goals and objectives. So when we look at that, to maximize the reach of that content, you can look at various different channels to help do that. So if you've identified that maybe, for this blog, people are finding it through our website, then you strategically, utilize your website as the main point. If you find that, social media is just where people are just eating this, or this audience is eating this content up, then you engage and you kind of strategize around that social platform audience. Email newsletters, there's differing opinions on, no one reads those. Well, some audiences do. So it's just about identifying who you want to hit, right? So when you're looking at that, amplifying that reach, it's about encouraging your audience to share that content, as I mentioned before. So let's say the social media side, encourage them to share on social, expand that. So what it does when you're encouraging that, it's expanding organically. It's reaching that no matter what you do, it's just kind of going on its own, right? So another way to kind of amplify that content, and I sort of mentioned it before, when you're talking about maybe connecting with other initiatives, is you can repurpose blog content into different formats. You can, maybe create small, short little video segments or infographics. They're catering to a different audience, but they're reaching that wider audience, right? So when I say different audience, it's still lumped into that same overarching audience, but you're maybe connecting with people that consume that content in different ways, such as through video, right? So example of that would be through TikTok. You take your blog topic, you sometimes see on those TikToks where people, or Instagram reels, where they're pointing at things, and literally some of those things could be your headings of your blog topics, right? Like top things to do when planning a vacation. And you always see the pointing or stuff like that. That's repurposed content. So part of that repurposing content, it kind of lends itself well into the next few points here of really diving in on what that looks like. So strategize around social. Just don't say, hey, let's throw it up on TikTok and see what happens. Build that into your social media strategy. Take those blog posts and build them in on the social platforms, linking them back to the full article on the site or whatever it may be. Share little snippets or insights from those blog posts and utilize them when it comes to social media, email marketing. Maybe even do a little video or even a written for an email newsletter, interview the author or the author's thoughts on what they were thinking or how they felt when writing this blog. And then what that does is it encourages sort of people to read more, or it's attracting new readers, right? So I mentioned before about blogging strategies, but it's always good to integrate into current or other strategies that you're maybe already doing. So social strategies, email marketing campaigns, this second to last point, influencer collaborations. What does that look like, right? Okay. So when we talk about influencer collaborations, what we're really saying is that's just the essence of the word, is you're connecting and collaborating with people of maybe like-minded thoughts or demographics, people that you're trying to reach, they're trying to reach them too. So collaborate. You can involve people to be guest bloggers, co-create content, feature maybe a featured blogger for a week or a month. What it does is you're kind of gaining new audience, but you're building that credibility as well. And when I talk about targeting and audience, it's the final point of targeting that right audience. So understand your audience. What do they want to see? What do they want to read? What are they interested in? And it goes all the way back to that planning as well. So when we're looking at that, you can use tools around sort of what people are wanting. So even just searching terms in Google, as I mentioned before, you can look at deeper, you kind of look at your social media analytics, and you can tailor some blog content around that as well. Okay, so into the next sort of point here, when we're talking about, we've identified the topics that we know when we're going to post them. We're connecting with audience. What the next step is sort of, you're kind of seeing, okay, are we reaching? Are we connecting? How does that work? What does that look like? So another crucial point, and another thing that you really want to set up when looking at blogging, and even in communications in general, whether it's blogs, social media, website performance, whatever, you want to have those measurable objectives, your KPIs, a system for tracking that success. So through analytic tools, and then making decisions that are based on data. So not just saying, I think people want this, let's do it, because inevitably what will happen is they'll be like, oh, it wasn't as successful as I thought. I told you this would be great, and it just didn't work. You could have known that if you sort of were making those decisions based on data, right? So the first point, when we're looking at those objectives, make sure they're clear, measurable, that all those buzzwords around when we're setting up goals, make sure that they allow you to track the progress and determine the effectiveness of your initiative. So an example of measurable objectives includes, we want to increase website traffic, improve conversion rates. What is the goal of this blog? We want to make it enhance our social media engagement. We want to generate leads through this. Whatever it is, have that objective and that measurable objective clearly kind of stated and laid out. When you're looking at KPIs, those are the specific metrics that sort of help you evaluate the progress towards those objectives that I mentioned. So choose relevant KPIs that align with those goals and can be measured consistently. So an example of a KPI would be, so if we're looking at, increasing website traffic, include the website traffic metrics. So unique visitors, page views, what does that look like? Engagement metrics. So how long are people spending on the page? Conversion rates, social media metrics. So like we always hear the term likes, shares, comments. Setting that baseline and understanding those KPIs, it'll help you make those informed decisions, right? When you're looking at those goals and objectives. So when we're looking at the tools around that, when you utilize analytics to collect this data and look at this data, it really helps you understand your objectives and the KPIs even more. And it allows you to adjust and go through as you go along. So Google Analytics is a huge one, popular for tracking sort of website performance, the behavior of the user, traffic sources. So how are they finding you or your blog? How are they getting there to your website? Social media platforms, Facebook, Meta, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, a lot of them have built-in analytics that you can sort of measure your engagement. There's third-party ones that'll also do that as well, but a lot of the platforms have it built in directly to help you start. That being said, the same thing goes for email marketing. MailChimp, they have insights and data that you can get to see how your campaigns are performing. So whether that's open rates or click-throughs, that could be a huge one when we're talking about blogging. So if you're utilizing your email marketing and you're saying, read more, click here. If you see, okay, this is nice, it's high, it's working, all good, it's meeting our KPIs, perfect. But if it's not, then you can maybe revisit. Are we using the right language? Is the call to action there? Do people understand to click through to that, right? So it's always about kind of looking and analyzing the data as you go. And when you analyze the data, you can make decisions. So use the data. It's not just a vanity. You hear these terms like vanity metrics, or people just want the big numbers. But if you really use the data to drive those decision-making processes around this and saying, hey, look, the data is telling us that we need to explore this strategy around blogs, then it's almost like that backup, right? For you to to kind of move forward with it or pull back, whatever it may be telling you. So when you're analyzing the data collected from those various sources, whether it's Google Analytics or the built-in, tools on social platforms, it gives you that insight into the behavior of your audience. So for example, it could be email marketing, MailChimp. We've been sending this out at 10 o'clock in the morning. A lot of people they're not clicking. Should we research timing around it? Like it just gives you that opportunity to look at different ways at doing things. So identifying trends, patterns, areas to improve upon based on that data. And it just helps you make informed decisions. Okay, so we are going to jump into just a real life sort of success story of strategic blogging. So this is just a generic example. I used it's a real example, but there's just kind of changed for privacy and names and stuff like that. But basically, the case study we kind of look at here is it's around a blogger. So meet Sarah. She's an inspiring entrepreneur who had a passion for healthy living and fitness. She decided to start a blog focusing on that, providing value information, tips, and advice on maintaining a healthy lifestyle. What she understood going into this is that the importance of strategic blogging and created a plan to maximize the blog's success. So right off the bat, she decided her niche. So she identified her target audience. She narrowed it down by sort of that niche that she found she wanted to target. So instead of creating that general fitness, she chose to really focus on a specific topic within the industry, such as plant-based fitness for beginners. So identifying, the goals and objectives around that niche market audience. Check mark 1. Doot. So really finding something you want to key in on. The next step, content strategy. So at this stage, she created a comprehensive strategy that engaged the readers. She researched topics, keywords that were related to the plant-based fitness, ensured that her blog posts would rank well in search engines. Her content included, beginner-friendly workout routines, plant-based meal plans, success stories of individuals who had achieved. So a lot of background into this, not just saying, okay, I want to do a blog on fitness. I'm going to throw one up and then never come back to it again. There's research, and the next topics are already being built as you go, which leads into the consistency of publishing. So she committed to the regular publishing schedule that worked for her. Initially posting 2 high-quality articles per week, this consistency helped build that audience and gain credibility as a reliable source of information. So that is crucial, huge. As I mentioned before, whatever the schedule it is, whatever you decide, just make sure there's consistency around that, and you're posting that high quality. So it's that consistency versus quality. How do you find that fine line balance within that? Engaging with the readers. So Sarah actively engaged with her readers by responding to the comments, emails, social media message promptly. She encouraged readers to participate by asking questions, seeking feedback, creating that sense of community around those blogs. So how can it's one thing to just put out the blog, but how do you engage them to be with you, as I mentioned, along the way with this journey? Collaboration and guest posting. So Sarah reached out to other people in that industry, influential individuals, brands. When you get to this level, you can maybe be working with other areas and brands, so brands and fitness, and just really leveraging that as opportunities to contribute to her blog. They helped her expand the reach. They gained exposure, new audiences. And it's just, again, back to that trust component. You're establishing herself as an authority, as that in her niche, in that market, in that area. So when we look at that sort of that collaboration, it can be intimidating sometimes, because you think, well, why do I want to maybe segment, right? Like, why do we need to, get this person involved? It's all about partnerships, because what you can do is leverage their audience as well. Promotion in social media. So big, huge one is that leverage social media to promote her blogs. So share that content, chop it up, create the visual appealing graphic side, but it's utilizing the content. So When you're looking at research for blog topics, maybe research the relevant hashtags to accompany it, right? How does that all play in to increase the visibility? So when you're consistently looking at that and consistently sharing content, engaging your audience, it's building that trust. It's attracting sort of those visitors, those audiences to the blog. So in this case, to her blog. It's not all just one thing, post the blog on the website, set it, forget it. You're integrating other strategies as well. So social, in this case, was a huge one. So eventually, when we're talking about blogging, obviously you've seen when you hear sort of blogs that are successful, there's always that component around monetization. So in this case, Sarah gained enough traction where she had the opportunity to explore that monetization strategy. So partnering with, relevant affiliate programs, influencers, promoting products. This might fit for some, but not all. Sometimes you see on blogs or even social, they'll explicitly say that this is paid for by whatever, right? But what that is doing is once you've sort of built up that audience, it allows you to explore those additional sort of streams of revenue, whether it's, ebooks or workout guides or whatever it is. It's an additional stream to help you with your industry, your company, your own personal, if you're an entrepreneur, in this case, such as Sarah. And then over time, Sarah's approach, it really paid off. Her blog became sort of that go-to resource for individuals interested in that plant-based fitness. She was, the content is consistent. There's that, she's built her audience, their followers, they know what to expect. They're sharing it. There's other, people jumping on board. There's a consistency in terms of the SEO results. She attracted a large enough audience where there was monetization was a possibility. It really allowed her to turn that blog into a profitable business. And whether that's your goal, that's huge. But in terms of just, you can look at that and replace the word profitable business with, we want to be an impactful company. We want to, really focus on this side of things of our organization, right? We want to connect with this part of our audience. So it doesn't always have to be about profits or monetization. It could be, just connecting and building a community. So with this example, what it really demonstrates is strategic blogging and blogging in general. There's a power around it that it can really help you, whatever your goal is. So when you look at it, you carefully plan it out. You take the time to identify your audience. You take the time to identify the topics. You take the time to really research the data. It helps you kind of whatever that goal or the objective that you laid out, it helps you achieve that. So when you're looking at all this stuff, and in this case, that effective promotion, it can lead to significant growth for that blog or whatever it is. If you identified, you wanted to increase web traffic, a blog can go a long way in helping you do that. So it's just one tool. And I think with anything, as I mentioned before, you should always have a plan, and maybe blogs don't make sense, right? So maybe you thought about it and it's like, yeah, this doesn't really work for us at this time. We just don't have the resources. Maybe, our industry, there's not enough topics to facilitate a weekly one. Well, if that's the case, maybe we do one, as I mentioned, every quarter. 4. Like that sounds like an easy, manageable number, but what's the goal around it, right? Okay, so we're almost kind of getting to the end here, and I just want to kind of wrap up, and then I'm going to have a slide here for questions. But the actionable steps for success. So as I mentioned before, identify those topics. Select the topics that align with your audience's interests, their pain points, the trends. Conduct that research, the keywords, find out what people are saying, kind of look into what is happening, right? So engage your audience, find those topics. When you're looking at that, ensure that the content provides value. It is answering a question, or it's connecting with your audience on some sort of level, right? Determining the cadence. So whatever that schedule is, find that frequency that works for you. It works for your audience, that works for your resources, that works for the content quality. bring all those in, right? So consistency is crucial. I can't stress it enough. You really want to look at that, but avoid sacrificing quality for quantity. If you start to get into that point where, yeah, as I mentioned, we got to get it every week, but the quality it starts to wane. It's counterproductive. It just doesn't make any sense. So analyze and track those metrics, look at the data, identify those KPIs, those objectives, look at what the data is telling you. Do you have to change the time of when you're sending it out? Or are we spreading it too thin? Does our audience want more content? Those metrics will tell you that. And then finally, continuously improve, change, right? Like look at things that are, so again, the data will tell you that, and it'll say, maybe we have to change up our style of blogging. What are the insights? What are they telling us? What are the metrics saying? So again, it's those data-driven improvements that'll help your blogging strategy. So if you're adapting your content, if you're, utilizing different strategies around promotions, if you're adjusting your posting cadence based on audience feedback, it's always good to be continuously improving. If your audience is saying and the data is saying that they want more, then invest in that, right? Test those new approaches. The data is saying that our audience wants more blogs, or flip side, the data is saying that they don't want as many, like they read sort of the first week and then second week's kind of slow and then picked up again on the third week. What is that saying, right? So it's all about improvement and kind of continuously tweaking and finding whatever works for you. So there's no magic. I'm not going to say like 4 blogs a month and you'll guarantee success to increase your website traffic. It doesn't necessarily work like that. It's whatever works for you or your audience in industry. So, okay, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I got a question here. So I run a membership organization and goal is to get people to join. Secondary goals would be newsletter signups, social media engagement. When should I focus on what call to actions? Great question. So the first one here, I'm just going to key on that, people to join. So what you could do, if we're talking blogging strategies, so what you could say is you've defined that that's the goal. Let's say your posting cadence is, 1 blog a month. Let's start with there. What you can do in those blogs, so those tips, maybe the first blog is 4 ways, and I don't know what the membership organization is, but 4 ways to improve upon this, and then you list, or 4 ways, whatever it is. So your call to action with that for getting people to sign up would be more of, if you're interested in learning more, if you're interested in contributing to this, or if you want to improve your blah, click here, or to learn more, or stuff like that, right? So you really, call to action is huge to focus on. It might sound like sometimes people might say, wow, it feels like I'm just asking people to do stuff all the time. Well, it's not a bad thing. Like some people may be like, oh, quit bugging me with trying to sign up. But if you identify that, if you're kind of researching the topics, the language that people are using, you'll get it. If your goal is to get, say, 5 and you get 7, great. But it's all, again, back to that data and that analytics side of things. So call to actions are great. I always encourage them. Awesome question. So when starting a blog, is there a better platform than others to post on? I mean, I wouldn't say that they all offer different opportunities and different, little bells and whistles of things, but you don't even have to have a blog, I guess, depending on, and I don't know what the situation is, but if it's an entrepreneurial thing and you may not have a website, you could be looking at other, blog hosting sites, stuff like that. But a lot of companies and clients that I've seen, they just host it directly on their own website. They utilize maybe a news function of their content management system, and that's how they create, that's where they house their blogs, right? So it's really about finding kind of what works for you. If you're part of an organization, it's probably beneficial to have it on your own site. That way you can kind of link it to your Google Analytics and other data points that are already being collected. You just build it into that. But if it's you're starting fresh, that there's tons of different options that are out there. So again, back to what I'm big on is research. Just find, kind of fire it into Google, source sites to start a blog, and then just kind of make your decisions based on what you need at that time. Okay. That's a really good question. So the question here was, our monthly newsletters 98% reporting of facts and industry news, maybe 2% opinion and advice. Should our blogs be mainly opinion or fact reporting? They can be a combination of both, depending on your strategy. If you identify that your blog is strictly opinion based, I would stick with that and try and kind of leave the fact reporting to the newsletter. Or if you find that it's kind of a mix of both, what you could say is the blog components that could maybe go with the newsletter could be, you take the facts and then you build out, the tips around that. So in our newsletter, we told you about this. Well, these are the 3 things that you can do to achieve X, Y, Z, whatever. If it's an opinion, it could be the person who did these 3 things, I did them, I achieved, that's my opinion, right? So it's really about, I wouldn't say there's an either or, but it's just finding that combination, right? Because as I mentioned before, you can be integrating and taking little snippets from blogs, and on the flip side, you could be taking stuff from your email newsletter around industry news and turning that into a blog that in this case maybe is an opinion based. So it's really about finding, that strategy that works for you, or the one that you're going to run with at that time. And as I mentioned, don't be afraid to adapt. And if you feel like, okay, all of our stuff on the blogs is opinion, let's course correct here, or maybe change it up where we introduce the fact side of it as well. Okay. We're right up against it. So actually we're ahead of time. So I'm just going to put up my contact information here. Always open to conversations, phone, email, text me. Happy to go out for coffee for those that are in Calgary and just talk more about blogging or any topic of communications that you might be interested in. Okay, so thank you very much. I will be sending out a follow-up email, and I'll include the presentation as well as a link to view the presentation that I just did here. So be on the lookout for that in the next few days. But thank you very much for looking at this. And I just noticed one more question. So typically, who can a small business person hire to help with all the analytics and monitoring, a general VA or a specialist? So there's, selfishly, we Alchemy, we look at that. We provide analytics and monitoring support to small businesses when they're kind of starting and kind of navigating that. So I encourage you to just give me a call or email and we can talk more. But it's really about finding what works for you at that time too. I know I kind of keep beating that dead horse about finding what works best, but it really is. The last thing I want to say is, contact this person and then they charge you an exorbitant amount of money and you just can't afford that, right? So it's about working and finding out what works best for you. So on that note, thank you very much, everyone, for joining me. And we have a full list of our upcoming webinars on our website under the events tab. So feel free to check those out and I will talk to you later. So thanks again.